In the autumn of 1837, a man named Josiah Wren walked into the Wind River Range with $11 in trade goods and walked out 8 months later warm, fed, and richer than when he went in. He never carried a stove, a sleeping pad, a lantern, or a single ounce of gear that came out of a factory. The record says he was not roughing it. The record says the man was comfortable, and the 15 tricks he lived by are not lost. They just do not have a price tag on them anymore. And that turns out to be the only reason you never learned them. My name is Levi Blackwood. I am 51 years old, 7th generation on Blackwood Ridge in the southern Appalachians. My people came up out of the Carolinas in the 1790s and have not left since. My grandfather kept a leather journal from 1936 until the week he died. He made me copy everything into it. He made me swear on it. Not on a Bible. On that journal. Said the Bible had enough people swearing on it already. He wanted something with some skin in the game. Near everything I'm about to walk you through, he either did himself or learned from men who had never once set foot in a gear store. These are not museum tricks. These are not campfire stories. Every one of them still works exactly the way it did in 1837. They faded for one reason. Somebody figured out how to charge you $300 for the plastic version. Not a conspiracy. Just how markets eat old skills. 15 tricks counted down. Some of them you will want to try this weekend. Some of them the law has a complicated opinion about. And number 4, the one that turns a snowbank into a warm room on a single candle. That one the safety people would genuinely prefer you not know exists. 15 down to 1. The question is not what we lost. The question is who got rich when you forgot. Number 15. The Shepherd's Crook. Picture. A man crouched by a small fire in the pines. Wool pants. Leather vest. Beard that has not seen a mirror since September. He is holding a single green stick cut from the brush 10 feet behind him, notched with his knife, one end wedged between 2 rocks, the other end extending out over the fire. From that notch hangs a cast iron Dutch oven, lid on, hovering 3 inches above the coals. Stew is simmering. The man is not sweating it. That stick is called the Shepherd's Crook. It cost him nothing. 0. Not a dime. The walk to cut it was the hardest part, and it was about 40 feet. A portable camp stove at the gear store today runs $69. The fuel canister is $6 and it is empty by Sunday afternoon, usually right when you are most hungry. Coleman started selling the first pressurized camp stove in 1923. They did not outlaw the green stick. They just made you feel primitive for using one. My grandfather used a shepherd's crook his entire life. Had a notching pattern he favored too. Said a man who could not hang a pot over a fire with what the woods gave him had no business being in the woods. He was not wrong, but he also could be a little hard to eat breakfast with. Free hardware. Free heat. Next one they actually wrote regulations against. Number 14. The reflector log wall. A hunter in the 1890s Adirondacks. Wool blanket pulled up to his chin. Snow falling straight and silent through the pine branches above him. He is not cold. He is warm. And the reason is standing 2 feet behind his fire. A wall of split logs stood on edge. Mud chinked at the base, throwing every unit of heat the fire makes back at his body instead of letting it drift off into the dark. That is the reflector wall. It is the simplest heat multiplier ever devised by a man who did not want to freeze to death and did not have a budget for alternatives. A 1917 United States Army Field Manual estimated a reflector fire kept 4 men above freezing at 20 below on 1 cubic foot of wood per man per hour. The Army knew. They wrote it down. You were just not told. The Forest Service started writing open fire restrictions in the 1930s. Leave no trace, codified in 1994, discouraged the practice further. Neither one was wrong about wildfire. Both together taught a whole generation to buy a catalytic heater instead of understand a fire. Field Manual 2176, the Army's 1992 survival manual, still teaches the reflector wall. It is in there right now. You could look it up tonight. The Army knows. The gear store is counting on you not asking. Number 13. The bow bed. 1830-something. Expedition Dr. Edwin James is watching Rocky Mountain trappers do something that would make a modern backpacker genuinely uncomfortable. They are cutting branches. Fresh spruce and pine boughs. Arm-length pieces, laid thick in a rectangle with the butt ends out and the soft tips pointing inward toward where a man would sleep. Wool blanket over the top. 6 inches of dead air trapped between a man and the frozen ground. That is the bow bed. Free mattress. Built in 20 minutes from what the forest hands you at no charge. A Thermarest inflatable sleeping pad at the gear store today runs $180 and springs a leak by year 3. Always on a trip. Never at home where you could fix it. Always on a trip. Leave no trace made cutting live branches a mark against you in most managed forest, and that is fair enough. But the American Alpine Club's own wilderness medicine texts confirm a proper bow bed insulates, as well as a closed-cell foam pad. The knowledge still works. The ground has not changed. The tree just is not yours anymore. Number 12. The one-blade camp kit. A French-Canadian voyageur in the 1830s sitting on a log by a small fire, breath fogging in the cold morning air, pulling a single curved blade toward his chest in long, controlled strokes. He is shaving a cedar strip down to a canoe rib, thin enough that if you held it up to the sky, you could see light through it. That same knife carved his spoon that morning before breakfast, mended his snowshoe frame after lunch when the lashing cracked on a bad step, split a hardwood pot hook before supper so he could hang his kettle without burning his hands. And when he rolled his blanket that night, the knife went into his belt, and that was the whole kit. One blade, one life. Everything else was just wood and time. That tool has a name, the crooked knife, hand-shaped from an old worn-out file by a blacksmith who charged him about a day's wage for the work. That blade lasted his whole life, then his son's life after him, then probably his grandson's, if the grandson had the sense to keep it oiled. Now here is what genuinely bothers me about this one. Stanley and Craftsman did not outlaw the crooked knife. Nobody wrote a regulation against it. Nobody held a congressional hearing on the dangers of a curved blade in a camp setting. What they did was quieter and more effective than any law. They filled every hardware store in America with 50 specialty tools, each one engineered to do exactly one thing, and none of them worth a nickel in a wet camp with cold hands and a fire going out. A chisel for this, a draw knife for that, a separate spoke shave, a separate gouge, a separate hook knife, a separate everything. $240 for a modern wood carving set that does roughly what one well-made blade did for a voyageur in 1831. North House Folk School in Minnesota still teaches the crooked knife. Their graduates carve spoons, canoe ribs, and camp furniture with one blade and a piece of wood and nothing else. The tool never got worse. The catalog just got bigger. And somebody got rich on every page of it. Number 11. Pemmican. A Cree woman on the northern plains in the 1820s. She is pounding dried buffalo meat in a hide bag with a smooth stone, mixing in rendered tallow and dried service berries, pressing the finished paste into a rawhide sack the size of a loaf of bread. That sack holds 4,000 calories per pound. It keeps 10 years in a cool cache. The Hudson's Bay Company issued 1.5 pounds per man per day. 4,000 calories of shelf-stable protein and fat for pennies per pound. A modern energy bar gives you 200 calories for $2.50. That is 120 times the cost per calorie. and it tastes like a sweetened piece of cardboard wearing a wrapper that promises adventure. Procter & Gamble put Crisco on the shelf in 1911 and spent the next 60 years telling Americans animal fat would kill them. Then the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition ran a 2010 meta-analysis of 347,000 people and concluded there's no significant evidence that saturated fat causes heart disease. The Cree woman was right. The cereal box man was selling. Number 10. The tallow lamp. A Kentucky cabin in 1845. Dead of winter. Sun gone by 4:30 and the nearest town a day's ride in the wrong direction. A man reaches up to the mantel and pulls down a shallow iron dish. No bigger than a soup bowl. Hardened tallow sitting in the bottom from last week's rendering. A twist of cotton rag laid in it for a wick. He touches a fireplace ember to the rag, and the room goes yellow and soft and warm and smells faintly, pleasantly, of Sunday's pork supper. That lamp burned 4 hours on fat that was going into the fire anyway. Cost him exactly nothing. The grease was a byproduct of eating, which he was going to do regardless. The light was just what happened when you did not waste what the hog gave you. Then Standard Oil started refining kerosene in the 1860s, and the marketing machine that followed was something to behold. By 1880, they had repositioned the tallow lamp so thoroughly that a man using one was understood to be poor, not thrifty, not self-sufficient, poor, a man who could not afford real light. That is a remarkable piece of salesmanship when you stop and think about it. They did not make a better lamp. They made you ashamed of a free one. Then Thomas Edison came along in 1879 and made the kerosene lamp look like something your grandfather used because he did not know any better. Every step up that ladder, somebody was selling you the next rung and kicking the one below it out from under your feet. Here is what they did not tell you. FEMA's own emergency preparedness guides still list improvised fat lamps as a viable light source when the grid fails. A can of Crisco and a shoelace will light your kitchen for a full week. Same physics. Same cotton wick. Same yellow glow that lit every cabin on every ridge in America for 200 years before a man in Ohio decided your grease was worth less than his kerosene. Your great-grandmother knew how to make that lamp in about 4 minutes. The power company spent a century hoping you would forget she ever did. Free light. Next one, free refrigeration. And this next one is going to make you look at your $500 cooler a little differently. Number 9. The wet bag cooler. Wyoming cattle drive. 1885. A cowboy soaks a rawhide bag in a creek, drops in a wrapped hunk of beef and a jar of milk, and hangs it from a cottonwood branch in the wagon's shade. Wind moves through the wet leather. Water evaporates. The inside of that bag stays 15 degrees below the outside air. Milk keeps until supper. Beef keeps overnight. No ice, no electricity, no Yeti. Australians called their version the Coolgardie Safe. Patented in the 1890s. Same physics. 0 moving parts. 0 recurring cost. General Electric shipped the Monitor Top refrigerator in 1927 at $295. 6 months of a working man's wages. The appliance industry has been selling you a bigger, colder, more electric box ever since. A modern Yeti hard cooler runs $350 empty. A wet canvas bag runs $4 at a hardware store. University of Arizona Agricultural Extension studies in 2019 confirmed the Zeerpot. Same principle. Drops interior temperatures by up to 20 degrees. The physics did not die. The catalog just got glossier. Number 8. Fat wood fire starter. A mountain man in the Rockies in 1840 drops to one knee at the base of a long dead pine stump and pulls out his knife. The heartwood inside is orange, resin-soaked, oily to the touch. He shaves curls of it into a pile no bigger than a walnut, strikes a spark from his steel, and the fat wood catches even in wet snow. He carries a pocketful for weeks. It costs him nothing. It is in every state in the lower 48. It has always been there. It is there right now, in the woods nearest to wherever you are sitting watching this. A box of chemical fire starter cubes at the gear store runs $8 for 12 uses, one-time use each, and half of them will not light in a real rain, which is exactly when you need them most. That has always annoyed me personally. Nobody banned fatwood. Nobody had to. The gear industry just made sure you never learned to recognize a resin-rich stump. The Forest Service's own Smokey Bear educational materials from the 1970s onward taught fire safety without ever teaching fire building. That was the trade. Safety for skill. And you got the short end. Number 7. The Pit Smokehouse. An Appalachian homestead in 1910. A shallow pit dug in clay soil, lined with river stones, a slow hickory fire smoldering at the bottom. Poles laid across the top. Slabs of pork side hanging from iron hooks, breathing cool gray smoke for 3 days. When the smoke was done, that pork kept 9 months. No refrigerator, no electricity, not one single ampere. The USDA Farmers Bulletin number 918, published in 1917, gave every American farmer the exact recipe. It is still online. They have not taken it down. They just stopped mentioning it. Then came the Federal Meat Inspection Act of 1906, and the great meatpacking corporations, Armour and Swift, who lobbied hard for it, watched their competition, every backyard smokehouse in America, get regulated into extinction. By 1978, 41 states had zoning codes prohibiting outdoor smoke-curing structures inside municipal limits. Not because the meat was unsafe, because Armour needed the shelf space. Modern grocery store bacon is injected with liquid smoke and phosphates and runs $9 a pound. Cure your own the old way and a whole side of pork costs you $3 a pound and tastes like something a person would actually want to eat. One law killed the smokehouse. One tin can almost kill the next one. Number 6. Char cloth. An 1820s frontiersman cuts a strip from a worn-out linen shirt, puts it in a small tin with a pinhole punched in the lid, and sets the tin at the edge of the coals. Smoke seeps out the pinhole until it stops. He opens the tin. Inside is a black, papery cloth that catches a single spark from a struck steel and holds it glowing for a full minute, long enough to nurse into flame with a pinch of dry moss. He carries that tin for a year, refills it from the next worn-out shirt. Char cloth, free fire, forever. John Walker sold the first friction match in 1827. Bic ships 1 billion disposable lighters a year. The lighter costs $1, works twice in the rain, and ends up in a landfill. Char cloth costs nothing, works in the rain, and never runs out of fuel because you are always wearing something that will eventually wear out. Colonial Williamsburg still teaches char cloth to 5-year-olds at their history camps. 5-year-olds. The knowledge is not complicated. It is just not for sale. And that is the only reason most grown adults have never heard of it. $1 lighter replaced by a rag in a tin. Next, a $60 hand warmer replaced by a can of sand. Number 5, the sand can hand, warmer winter of 1932. Kentucky. A Depression-era drifter fills an empty tomato can with dry creek sand, sets it in the coals of a fire until it is too hot to touch, pulls it out with a green stick, wraps it in an old flannel shirt, and shoves it inside his blanket roll. That can radiate heat for 6 hours. He sleeps warm on frozen ground. Not $12 to his name, and warmer than most people reading this right now in a house with a working furnace. Sand has one of the highest heat capacities of any common material on Earth. It is the same physics used in modern rocket mass heaters and industrial thermal batteries. Cornell's College of Engineering ran the numbers on sand-based thermal storage in a 2021 paper. Confirmed. The physics is real. A disposable hot hands hand warmer runs $1.50 for 6 hours of heat and is garbage by morning. A rechargeable electric version runs $60 and needs a wall plug. A can and a scoop of sand cost you $0 and works as many times as you are willing to dig sand. Thermacell and their competitors would rather you did not do that math. My grandfather did it in 1938 and never bought a hand warmer in his life. He thought they were one of the funnier things the modern world had come up with. Free heat in a can. Free heat in a snowbank is next. Number 4. The Snow Cave Candle Furnace. An Arctic expedition photograph, 1911. A man in a fur-lined hood carves a domed shelter into a hard snowdrift. He smooths the walls with his bare palm to seal the pores. He punches a single vent hole through the ceiling with a stick. Then he sets one tallow candle on a shelf of packed snow and lights it. Outside the cave, 40 below zero. Inside, in 20 minutes, 32 degrees above zero. One candle, one vent. 72 degrees of warming on a birthday candle. Mountaineering. The Freedom of the Hills, 8th edition, published in 2010 by the American Alpine Club, still teaches this. Field Manual 2176 teaches it. Every Norwegian military conscript learns it. American car campers do not, because a 4-season tent at the gear store costs $800 and the retailer needs you to need it. Snow is one of the finest insulators in nature. A 4-hour tea candle raises interior temperature by 20 to 30 degrees, and a person's own body heat does the rest through the night. Now I'm going to say this clearly because I mean it. Ventilation is not optional here. Carbon monoxide is real and it does not negotiate. You dig the vent first, the shelf second, the candle last. In that order, every time, no exceptions. Do it right, and a snowbank keeps you alive on nothing but a birthday candle and good sense. That was never a secret. It was just never sold. Number 3. The Swedish Torch. A Scandinavian logger in 1890 stands an 18-inch section of dry spruce log on its end in the snow. He splits it into 6 wedges with his axe, but leaves the bottom 2 inches intact so the log holds together. He binds the top with a strip of wet bark to keep it from spreading. He drops a handful of birch shavings into the center split and lights them. The log burns from the inside out. 4 hours of stable, self-feeding flame. Flat top surface for a coffee pot. Never needs tending. Never tips over. Never needs adjusting. Mountain Safety Research sells a titanium backpacking stove for $189 that requires a $6 fuel canister every weekend. Coleman has been telling you since 1923 that a stove is what civilized people cook on. The Swedish Torch is 1 log, 1 axe, and 1 match. 4 hours. 0 recurring cost. The Swedish military still teaches it. Bushcraft instructors still teach it. It has never once stopped working. It just never had a shelf at the gear store. That is the only reason you are hearing about it from me, instead of from your father. Number 2. The Birch Bark Canoe. 1830. Henry Rowe. Schoolcraft watches Ojibwe canoe builders on the shore of Lake Superior peel single sheets of birch bark 10 feet long from standing trees in early summer, when the sap runs and the bark releases clean. They bend white cedar into ribs, sew the bark with split spruce roots, seal the seams with heated pine pitch. The finished canoe weighs 50 pounds. It carries 1,000 pounds of men and cargo. It runs the rapids of the Ottawa River, and it can be repaired by anyone, anywhere in the woods, with 3 materials found within 50 feet of the water. Grumman started stamping aluminum canoes in 1944 from surplus aircraft metal left over from the war. By 1970, the birch bark canoe was a museum piece. A modern Kevlar canoe at Bell Canoe Works runs $3,200, weighs nearly the same, and cannot be repaired by anyone except the factory. The Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission counts fewer than 40 master builders alive in North America today. 30 or so in Ontario. Marcel Lebel in Quebec. A handful in Minnesota. When they go, 3,000 years of watercraft knowledge goes with them, unless someone in the next generation picks it up. I want to say that straight. That someone could be you. The spruce roots are still there. The birch trees are still standing. The pitch is still in the pine. 50-pound canoe. 10,000-year design. 40 men left who can build one. Which brings us to the one trick underneath all 14 that came before it. Number 1. The skill of not needing. Number 1 is not a trick. Josiah Wren walked into the Wind River Range in the fall of 1837 with $11 in trade goods and walked out the following June with a pack of prime beaver worth $600. He lived to be 71 years old. He died in a bed he built himself, in a cabin he built himself, on land nobody could foreclose on. The record shows him buying flour, iron, lead. It shows him buying almost nothing else. Ever. He was not poor. He was sovereign. Every trick on this list, the shepherd's crook, the reflector wall, the char cloth, the fatwood, the snow cave, the bark canoe, was a piece of the same one skill. The skill of not needing. Not needing a store, a canister, a catalog, a factory, or a permission slip from someone who profits off your dependence. That is what a mountain man was. Not a rugged loner in a fur hat. A person who had subtracted the middleman from his own survival. The gear industry did not take that from you in a courthouse. They did not pass a law against knowing things. They just made sure that every time you wanted to be warm or fed or dry or lit, there was something to buy first. And they made the buying easy and the knowing hard. And they did it so gradually that nobody noticed the trade being made. 15 tricks in, and you can see the shape of it now. I am not here selling you doomsday. I am not telling you civilization is ending and you had better start hoarding tallow. I am telling you the opposite. Civilization is fine. The stores are open. The gear is available. The only thing missing is the part of you that could have handled a cold night on your own. And that part is not gone. It is not broken. It is just untrained. Pick one. Just one this week. Save the drippings off your next batch of bacon and try a fat lamp on your back porch Saturday evening. Or cut a green stick and cook one meal over a fire in your yard with the stove turned off. Or make one square of char cloth in a soup can in your coals and light a fire rod off it. Or just find a resin-rich pine stump on your next walk and put a piece of fat wood in your pocket and carry it around until you feel like using it. One thing. That is how the library reopens. One book off the shelf at a time. I ran the snow cave candle drill with my nephew 2 winters ago in a drift behind the woodshed. 22 degrees outside, 34 inside within half an hour on one tea light. Boy has not asked me for a heated tent since. Looked at me like I had handed him something that belonged to him all along. Because I had. Tell me down below, which of the 15 did your grandfather or your grandmother actually do? Not read about, not see on television. Actually did, with their hands, in the cold, because that was just how things got done. The one that shows up most in the comments is the one I build the next full video around. The old men in fur hats knew things a whole industry bets you will never learn. You just learned 15 of them. Do not let them close the library on your watch. Keep the old ways. They kept us. Next time up on this channel, we are going after the 2-cent lamp oil that lit half the frontier homes in America and put a whole industry out of business twice. Once in 1859 and once in 1908. The stuff you can still make in your kitchen from ingredients at any grocery store. And the year they made sure the recipe fell out of every household almanac in the country. That one is going to bother some people. See you then.